James had always enjoyed visiting his aunt's countryside home. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. That evening he realized he had made a mistake. It was nearly midnight, and he had missed the last bus home. "I told you to leave earlier," his aunt said, her face unusually serious. "There's no transport this late. Stay the night." But James was stubborn. He remembered seeing an old railway station just 2 kilometers away. Maybe he could catch a late train or find someone who could help. As he walked down the deserted road, the night felt heavier. The trees lining the path twisted in the wind, their bare branches resembling skeletal fingers stretching toward him. The further he walked, the quieter it became, until he could hear only his own footsteps. Then he heard another set of footsteps. They were faint, distant following. James stopped. The sound stopped too. He turned around. Nothing but darkness. The cold wind blew against his neck, and he quickened his pace. Finally, the railway station came into view. It was ancient, crumbling, and forgotten. A single rusted bench sat under a broken lamp that flickered weakly. The tracks were covered in weeds, long abandoned. Yet, oddly enough, the arrival board was still on, glowing faintly. It read, "Last train 11:45 p.m. James glanced at his phone, 11:40 p.m. A chill ran down his spine. His aunt had told him this station hadn't been in use for years, so why was the sign still working? Then in the distance a low whistle echoed. A light appeared, growing brighter. The ground trembled as a train, a black rusted locomotive, emerged from the darkness. Steam hissed from its sides, and its windows were covered in grime. The brakes screeched as it stopped before him, the doors opening with a groan. James hesitated. Everything inside him screamed, "Don't get on." But then he saw movement inside. People, silent passengers, sitting eerily still in the dim yellow light. They looked wrong. Their faces were shadowed, their heads slightly tilted, as if they were listening. The air behind him grew icy. He felt watched. He turned his head. Someone was standing behind him. A tall, hunched figure with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. Its skin was ashen, stretched too tight over its skull. It didn't blink, it didn't breathe, it only stared. The train horn blared, snapping him out of his frozen state. Panic surged through him. James leapt into the train. The doors slammed shut. He turned. The figure was gone. But now, something was wrong. The train was moving, but the view outside didn't change. The same broken platform, the same twisted trees, repeating. Then James looked around. The passengers had turned toward him. Their faces were rotting, sunken eyes, peeling skin, hollow mouths slightly open. Their heads twitched in unison, bones creaking as they faced him. Then came the whisper, "You shouldn't have gotten on, James." The lights flickered. In the brief darkness, he saw them. Dozens of rotting hands reaching for him. The lights came back and they were closer. James scrambled backward, banging on the door. No handle, no way out. The train sped up. A reflection in the window caught his eye. His own reflection was smiling. But James wasn't. The reflection tilted its head and whispered, "You are one of us now." The train plunged into darkness, and James screamed until his voice faded into the night. James' aunt had given up hope. The authorities found no trace of him, no footprints, no witnesses, just a lonely railway station that hadn't been operational for decades. Then, on a foggy night, he came back. She woke to a knock at the door. Her heart stopped. Slowly, she opened it. James stood there, but something was wrong. His skin was pale, almost gray. His clothes were the same ones he had worn that night, but covered in dirt, as if he had been buried. His eyes were dull, lifeless. "Auntie," he whispered, voice hoarse. "I took the train, but I came back." Tears filled her eyes. She pulled him inside, hugging him tightly. His body was ice cold. "You've been missing for a month," she cried. "Where have you been?" James hesitated. His lips trembled. I don't remember." But as he stepped inside, the house felt wrong. The air grew heavy, like something unseen had followed him in. That night, strange things began happening. The clocks in the house froze at 11:45 p.m. The lights flickered. She heard whispers in the dark, echoes of James's voice, except he wasn't speaking. And then she saw it. James, standing in the hallway. His back was turned to her. But in the reflection of the mirror beside him, his face was smiling. And his lips moved silently. "You are one of us now." The lights went out, and his aunt screamed. Now James was back, but was he really James? Or had something else come back in his place?